from the lucid fringe. Ravings from the lucid fringe. Musings from an unpasteurized life. Improvised on the front line of love and beauty. Welcome, I'm Semeric Yarrow. This week on Ravings from the Lucid Fringe, Wandering Within. Life Dimensions number 2. Mind Games. There's a certain ambivalence in me to tackling the subject of mind by using written language, even if it's a key part of our vertical trinity with the body and the heart. In writing about it, I join the thousands of words on the subject appearing every day, many of which, in my opinion, end up floating, ungrounded in the world. Psychologies and philosophies that often detach us from life rather more than connecting us to it. The mind loves to categorize, as our whole modern academic discourse and other jargons indicate. And for all the reductive analytical brilliance that shows, there are dangers there. Words become too pat, concepts too easily fixed, like algorithms. I prefer to dance with the mind with a little distance. The easiest way to keep our mind active but tethered, even in overstimulating environments, is to come back to the body, to pay gentle attention to what our different places are experiencing. The head, containing that complex brain, is the least formed part of our bodies. It's virtually spherical, like an unmoulded piece of clay, suggesting in its structure a part of us intended to take in, more than to reach out and act like our limbs do. There are vast, invisible mysteries accessible within it or through it, ways of responding to life that we can train. Embodying our thoughts, our intentions, our affirmations, brings them to practice more than just mouthing platitudes. And that mouth is, after all, the one place where our heads do reach out and act, mostly through the incredible liberation of our speech organs, propelling our mind's thoughts into the world in sound, in words, which our ancestors cleverly turned into these symbols that I am reading on a page to represent those sounds. And now we operate within these linguistic grooves, organic algorithms. Poetry, the linguistic dance, is another of my favourite ways to break beyond this moulding, to reach back into the pre-linguistic origins of thought, wherever that may be, to break through language's games. We will never develop computers with real artificial intelligence, or malls with living beauty, until we use more than our intellect to do it. Our intellect is principally based on what came before, and I would hazard is that part of the mind that truly is most lodged in the brainy bits. Poetry shows, of course, that our minds are more than intellect. They are more than memory, too, though good memories make for good minds, able to learn from mistakes and move forward. Memory is held throughout the body and activated when we move. I stepped out of a shower I'd not used in 10 years, and my energy body reminded me of the movement and awakened memories. Conversely, memory games and exercises are great ways to develop a stronger energy body, more resilient. Rote learning is not all bad. When I was 9 years old, I was taught a technique for the mind, using a simple syllable as a surfboard to catch the flow over the waves of thought back towards their calmer origins. Super simple and yet not, for there are great layers of the mind that remain turbulently busy whenever we give them focus. Increasingly, I am once more of the opinion, who has opinions? The mind, that the unmanifested part of ourselves which we label mind is just as complex, radically busy, and unknowable as the body. The balance was tipped for a while in my own mind in reaction against the Western Catholic Enlightenment scientific dismissal of the body. The mind became the bad boy after what I experienced as exhaustingly disconnected mainstream psychological talk. Yet strive to know it we must. Gnosis, that quest towards the kernel of ourselves that is God, fluidly divisible into Atman, Brahman, Buddhi, and the myriad other descriptors given by the ancient Indian adventurers into consciousness, including names for the different stages of thought. The very thing we use to know the world with is itself difficult to know, which might of course hint at the fact that mind and world-body are one, and divisions are illusions. Mind is the source of thought, we say, as if that solves the problem, for the ultimate source of thought was naively believed by early 20th century psychologist types to be rationally deducible, comprehensible, separable from the manifested world. Psyches coming in various useful bits, egos, ids, subconscious bits, superegos criticizing us acutely, characters in our own play, as the best psychodrama activities would have it. And I've definitely found it extremely useful to give them physical form in space, seeing the critic and putting him back in his place, for example, or manifesting dialogues between shadow aspects of the play, or the masculine and feminine parts of me. Those early psychologists arose in a time, a place, a milieu, a brutally vanished culture. Jewish Vienna, on the Central European edge of more esoteric aspects of Kabbalistic Judaism and ancient magical practices. More spiritually inquiring writers of the time tried to remind us that the unconscious contains a host of heavenly and demonic forces with their own kinds of consciousness that the tidy salons would rather steer clear of, even as revolution, war, and darker forms of collective mind control erupted across that continent. What happens when we don't give credence and awareness to such forces of spirit? Perhaps they do shrivel up, forgotten, as Terry Pratchett hit upon in Small Gods decades ago, except that it's very easy for them to resurface. A theatre troupe in the modern Netherlands built a workshopped piece that invoked ancient forces we've long stopped believing in, and were then spooked by the fact that when they entered deep ceremony, the presence of Zeus, that comical caricature of a deadly supreme god force, although truly potent if we really believed in him, was palpably felt by the actors, viscerally sitting in the chair they'd left for him. The esoteric types who acted as counterparts to Jung and Freud worked with invokings and banishings as a necessary part of exploration of the world of spirit, esprit, the same word in French as mind itself. Mind lifts us inexorably out of the manifested world of senses that it interprets and towards the invisible, a journey that could be hazardous for the unwary. In fact, many are the traditions that give us clues on how to exercise our minds in the realm of spirit. When modern Australians start to debate taking down Christmas decorations at New Year, the whole Latino world and beyond raise hackles at the kind of ignorance that doesn't realise the esoteric importance of Epiphany and the Day of the Three Kings, 12 days into Christmas. Catholic tradition syncretically absorbed earlier spiritual and magical ideas by the bucketful. And however cynical that process of ideological conquest at times, it at least gives us multiple pointers to the patterns of cyclically entwined spirit that our nature-honouring forebears acknowledged before Protestantism and the darkest phases of the Enlightenment wiped it all away as superstition. There are, for example, 9 quite specific hierarchies of angelic beings, with seraphim far distinct from those closer to incarnate humans, angels and archangels. Other religious cultures and traditions have sung, danced, written, played varieties of celestial beings, filtered through their own cultural lenses. Our modern minds have conjured many ways of looking more intensely at our own human beingness, as classic psychoanalysts or Jungian archetypes do. The ninefold Enneagram is a curious system, derived in bizarre circumstances through that brilliant, dangerously charismatic figure Gurdjieff, adapted for personalities after him, and far more useful than skeptics would think, given its origins. Myers-Briggs personality types appeal to those seeking complexity. The medieval temperaments, bringing us just 4 character types, appeal to those who find reassuring security in stable patterns of fourfold nature, just like many indigenous knowledge systems encourage. Such systems, of course, come through our minds, but it takes hubris to believe they're original to us moderns. They remain mysterious, even as they support us in knowing ourselves more. We delight in solving the riddle of our personalities, but it's just tidbits and tasters for the most part. Astrology, of course, is the classic, geometrically beautiful, wildly astute and desperately vague system that offers so much to the modern psychonaut, and is usually built on a fourfoldness, interacting with a threefoldness, like the 12 beats in African drum rhythms. Perhaps there's nothing in it, except that statisticians like Michel Gauquelin found that there is. Kari Mullis, that most maverick and monkey-mind curious of the Nobel Prize-winning scientists, wrote a book 20 years back, Dancing Naked in the Minefield, that stuck all kinds of voodoo needles in bland mainstream science, like observing the uncanny number of alien abductions that took place after seeing owls, always harbingers of the spirit world, or noting the mathematical unlikelihood of him amateurishly but correctly identifying so many Capricorns, his own sun sign, on first meeting them. Though maybe this was spirit playing tricks on him and us. Who creates the synchronicities we identify? Minds wander in search of something to pay attention to. Indeed, this is what we do in our mind's endless quest for meaning, which will give our whole beings purpose. The mind at its best is creative, inventive, playful in its interpretation and representation of life. Maya, that illusion of separation, is also what allows the blank canvas, the empty stage, to give rise to narrative, image, metaphor, story. Leela, divine play, the Sanskrit term that acts as Maya's joyful counterpart. Our words, our musical notes, our theatrical gestures, our philosophical and scientific theories pop up like subatomic quarks in response to the world, to try and explain the mystery, because we're storytellers and the mind is our engine for that. Of course, if we're also divine, it is a world we're making up. That can feel isolating and lonely, a great big lie, or it can be liberating. In my experience, it's most liberating when we recognize that our best invention is we, the collaborators, the audience, the other parts of ourselves, witnessing and appreciating. We are one. We are companions in this cosmic dance with other human minds, but also with the mind of the world around us. And we get closer to knowing gnosis of all this when we notice patterns in creation. The patterns, as astrologers might wink, that we give attention to can lift us or drop us. There is a fractal unfolding which coincidences highlight in the moment we flow into their awareness. Modern individualistic psychology, however, has tended to ignore the deeper patterns of more than human life. Western man sets boldly off into the unknown, while the spirits of which he is unaware, but also connected to, giggle uncontrollably, probably. We even believe, when at our most naively, nihilistically hubristic, that it's all just random, a bizarre extension of natural selection that has little in the way of bigger purpose, which is why I guess we have to find our individual purpose. Dawkins told us this in the 90s, even though Darwin might battle to recognize the redevelopments of his theories there. In Signature in the Cell, Stephen Meyer reveals that the sequencing of mitochondrial DNA has remarkable similarities to the way computer systems operate. Computing that is designed by an intelligent mind, however much it may be starting to explode beyond the rational mind's limitations. By extrapolation, something intelligent seems to have designed life. Or those fantastically complex mitochondria in our cells were made by intelligent aliens, as the fiercely atheist Francis Crick preferred to suggest as a serious hypothesis. The famous DNA explaining biologist would rather this for some reason than to contemplate that there might be something spiritual and invisible playing any kind of directorial role in our opus. The kind of spiritual beings, perhaps, that apparently routinely spit out images of double helixes at humans exploring other dimensions with entheogens like ayahuasca. Meyer, a philosopher of science and practicing Christian, has his own private views on who that intelligence might be, which are informed by his own context and culture. As do I, naturally. We are a varied lot. The original Gnostics, who, as you probably know, both wrote a bunch of Gospels and inspired The Matrix, saw wicked bastard alien types creating this world of illusion to keep us down. And then there are those who see our own extraterrestrial origins, not just alien mitochondria. Lots of interesting narratives for our minds to play with. It's clear to me, though, that whatever we call that intelligence, we're the product of its psychedelic dreams, as are tropical rock lobsters. For this context is the bigger part of we for us to drop into. Multiple sci-fi scripts are terrified of the hive mind, creatures our size whose thoughts come from somewhere central, clones and cells without independent thought. It seems primal, this fear, yet culture is the human tribal hive mind in action, our independent inventiveness, mere floral overlays to deep networks of connection. What Jung would call the collective unconscious, but is actually a bigger kind of conscious awareness. Exactly what our attempts to grasp the mystery are jumping up at, trying to catch the bubbles in what we call our thoughts. Group intelligence is seen in a flock of birds, and we can understand this when we move in a group with an awareness of two others, one on each side like a bird's eyes would see, and we move with them as if in a triangle, though they may be looking at two different members of the group, and every so often we may find ourselves popped into a leadership position for a while. This is pretty much what our minds usually do in groups. Like herd animals, teenagers grasping at the vibrant colours of the new areas of their body-mind coming online, check out for those peers at their fringes, flowing with them culturally like birds do physically. Adolescence is of course the era when a wildly scattered, moving, creative body system comes online. We Waldorf teachers know it as the astral body, closer to what we think of as the mind than the physical and etheric stroke energy bodies. Animalistic, overdramatic, over-emotional, pouring energies that used to be physical before puberty into something much more mental, even as the hormones awaken other new urges in the psyche. So the physical and energy bodies slump, slow to wake, sprawled over desks, adjusting to new human possibilities, cocooning once more on some level. And with all this comes a quest for truth, a thing that gets crystallized in tougher thoughts and expressions than earlier childhood was interested in. Truth, though, is a slippery kind of drug. My teen experiments kick-started a search for the kind of mind truth that decent nights of sleep also provide. Sleep where the astral mind body separates from the physical and energy bodies. The individualist psychological culture, of course, sees the dream life as a dark and disreputable zone for repressed garbage to flood our system, needing to be talked through on enlightened couches. Without a suitable language, without an awareness of the collective mind and our connections to it, that's what it may remain. Surfacing its truths, however, is what more nature-connected cultures have long valued. Morning gatherings in many Amazonian cultures begin with dream sharing. Lucid dream astral travelling, playing with those unsolvable dream truths, is a way to track the mystery, alongside multiple other technologies developed by shamanistic societies. Working with dreams and visions are ways we tap into the bigger picture and stalk our way to the next parts of this imagination game. Or we could just get stuck in our phones, these addictive, gamified pieces of psycho-tech intended to entrance and absorb our distractible minds. The ever-inquisitive monkeys in our minds are an eloquent expression of the animalistic astrality in our brains, quickly shifting on to the next buzz of sensual information, particularly if what's on offer, like in social media, Substack or Spotify likes, promises to raise our levels of status and respect. We do like to be appreciated. In fact, that's one of the best things about we. Dopamine hits for doing well. Teenage pods, again, offer a raw picture of this status-seeking, its wonders and dangers. And while our bodies go on physical trips, we've obviously long been pushing our minds into other, more psychedelic realms through mind techniques and entheogenic plants and chemicals. In my own limited journeys into such landscapes, I've found myself aware of the glorious underlying patterns being revealed, the geometry of connection, the multiple channels that truth pours through. In awe of the wildly varied creativity that life presents us with given half a chance. Though undoubtedly the heart has been involved too in such journeys, stories for another day. The suppression of such experiences became part of the 20th century's legal psychological lie. Of the legally available mind-altering drugs, alcohol, tobacco, caffeine, refined sugar, none were mind-expanding. None opened doors to other ways of seeing. Those substances that do, many newly legal or on the verge of legal recognition, and others only now emerging from their roots in indigenous usage, take us Westerners, raw teenage adventurers, often without a map or a guide, down rabbit holes which might not always be as wise as we think. Fools rush in. Lewis Carroll, of course, whose rabbit hole first gave us the phrase, exhilaratingly followed his mind on a bunch of archetypally imaginative trips, following the rabbit like any shaman would a spirit animal. "Where do I go from here?" asked Alice, and the cat tells her to choose, for the whole of Wonderland echoes the grooves and patterns of the fairy tales, the mythologies, the strange helpers and signs and guides and wonders, the narrators round fires. One thing we long to do, of course, is lift our thinking and, by consequence, our actions, which we'd like to be more directed by conscious, morally wise thinking than they often are. It may be an integrated system, but the more we inquire into the way the game works, the better we may play it for all parts of our being to be content. This is the reason, I think, we want to win, to lift ourselves out of the mud, to fly high. The mind reaches out like our upper branches. It's biased towards the light and the height. In its most potent metaphor, the brain and its vessel, it lives at the top of the body. Most of our dominant senses live up there too, which does give us a rather top-heavy perception unless we are actively tuning in to the value and power of the body, the sense of touch, the skin, and then the body of the earth and the wisdom of clay. Thoughts are curious things, especially in this phase of human evolution where our belief in our actually impossible individuality makes them a little untethered from the things that planted thoughts in us before. Animal thoughts and angelic ones, guided by some kind of group mind perhaps that still exists for some but has become disorientatingly loose for others. If we sense that kind of intelligence in the background, Brahman behind us, it's like it's taken off the safety wheels in recent times. Now we can think what we like, and often that's not exactly wise. Our whole species is having a teenage house party with the planet. We're always in danger of being swayed by our feelings and dropping into destructive thought loops, habits that we struggle to break. I really want to not scratch that itch, but can I hold mind over matter? Can I witness the irritation and the pleasure with equanimity? Can I listen to the thoughts that may be arriving, if we call for them, from spirit? Witnessing, reflection, noticing when we're absent, when our minds take us off to places that have little relationship to the reality of this moment of the play. Pulling ourselves back to self, observing with awareness, even while the flood of perceptions continues. This is what we call mindfulness. It's not just about a quiet stillness, though in the overwhelming sensory bombardment of modern life it often feels that that's what's needed. There is sensory stimulation of another kind in a forest, like there is from spending a few moments in my garden, or in hearing the deep, rich but calm vibrations of a sacred gong. A sensory experience that feels grounded in the here and now, rather than rushing to grab my attention, like a human-designed mall. So this game, this creative exploration that the mind leads me towards, is one of the great joys of life. I play it from time to time thinking my little magnificent mind has come up with something new, before I remember that there's nothing new under the sun, but it's fun to think it. It's just that the mind also needs breaking in. It can float off too quickly to unhealthy patterns, and yet it longs to find experiences that enrich it, that awaken the deeper memories. Descartes' disruption, cutting our minds off from our own bodies, from our communities, from our ancestors, from our planet, has done them and us no favours. If we're part of a conscious planet, we need to remember the bigger hive mind and listen to the fuzz, buzz, hum of creation, watching the bees leading us to the honey source. Then our brilliance can shine in truth and beauty together. And we can remember too that this is a game of love. So, thank you for listening to this latest episode in the series, and you can find all of my articles and my recordings at lucidfringe.substack.com, except my music and poetry from the past, which is all available at simrickyarrow.bandcamp.com, and the background recordings and sounds that you will have heard are all either from those recordings or they are my own. Please do give this a rating if it's on your podcast app. Please spread the word if you enjoy what you hear, and if you want to give me some feedback or commentary, of course I'm very open to that. Any suggestions for future episodes,